Hey there, A Pushers, Esker here and Vieira. I'm here to bring you chapter 13, the sectional crisis. So, in this chapter, we're really going to talk about what's going to lead to the fracture of the United States and lead to the Civil War. So, let's kind of pay attention to these things and think about them like chronologically as we're moving towards the outbreak of war in 1860. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at is sectionalism. So, we have seen sectionalism throughout this class so far, from looking at the differences between the northern colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. And hopefully by now you understand that those things, those differences in like political ideology, in economics, in social aspects has continued to be features of the United States thus far. Okay, so for the pretty much the first portion of United States history leading up to the Civil War, really leading up to prior to Civil War, I guess, about to 1820, Americans were pretty content to just kind of compromise over this issue of slavery. And Northerners, for the most part, kind of absolved themselves from the issue, although we know that they were very deeply involved in the institution of slavery via the Market Revolution in the North and factories and all those types of things that we've been really reiterating over the past couple months. And as the United States expands west, as we start to gain more territory from the Louisiana Purchase and then later from the Mexican Cession, the issue of slavery continues to play a more prominent role in American politics, in social circles, and certainly in the economy. Okay, so the first kind of struggle that we have is in the Ohio River Valley, and that really becomes the first kind of battleground, setting the stage for what's going to follow later. And what comes out of the Ohio River Valley, which the Ohio River is east of that or west of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's going north to south, and it kind of divides what will become the South and what will become more known as the North. So we have the Missouri Compromise of 1820, and that was really a turning point in this American sectionalism because it really showed how decisive and divisive the issue of slavery had become in the nation. So Southerners and Northerners point to different parts of the U.S. Constitution that say, whether or not slavery would be existed, whether or not, or would be allowed, would it not be allowed, and whether or not the federal government could touch the issue of slavery, or if that was left up to states themselves. And so we have the Missouri Compromise sets out the 3630 line, which basically says that any land, any new states above the 3630 parallel line would be free from slavery, and then any states down below would be open to slavery. And we don't really have this idea of popular sovereignty, but keep that kind of in your mind as we move through this chapter. But again, the issue of slavery is starting to kind of boil, if you will, in the pot. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Vera.
All right, so I'm going to cover, keeping with this sectional crisis that the chapter revolves around, I'm going to focus on the political sectionalism of the time. So a couple of things. The Second Great Awakening creates this divide amongst America's religious communities. You begin to see major churches like the Baptist, Presbyterian Church breaking up into sectional branches, a Northern and a Southern Baptist church, with pretty much the main difference being their views on slavery. We referenced this in the previous chapter on how oftentimes Southern religious leaders would use biblical references to sort of defend slavery. And so you began to see the sectionalism of the country not just being a political sectionalism, but also religious in nature as well. Jackson's Democratic Party really tries to not touch the issue of slavery in the 1820s and 1830s. They try to recruit voters both in the North, South, and in the West by focusing on issues of white supremacy, focusing on issues of expansionism, and how they wanted to build a nation that was increasingly moving west and increasingly was looking after the rights and privileges of white men. So really the Democratic Party early in the 1920s and into the 1930s, they really don't address the issue of slavery as much when they are recruiting voters or crafting their platforms. Then the Whigs enter the conversation. And so the Whigs offer a alternative choice to the Democratic Party, but they really never build a cohesive voting bloc. The problem with the Whig political party is that it really wasn't a unified political party. depending on where you were, depending on where you lived, your belief system was very different if you were a Whig. And so they're never able to really build a strong national following. There was a abolitionist party in the 30s and 40s, the Liberty Party, and their platform was basically around abolition, and they were forced, or they're focused on um, creating a political party that was single issue. Their single issue was stopping slavery in the United States. Few Americans really vote for that political party. It's kind of just more of a footnote in American history. And the Democrats continue to dominate national politics, with the Whigs being kind of the plus one, the alternative choice. Texas and the admission into Texas as a slave state is a major turning point in the sectionalist crisis. When Texas enters the Union as a slave state, really with the push of Polk, a Democratic president, and the war that was created, in a sense, basically to bring Texas into the fold, it's pretty clear to Northern Democrats that their political party is the party of slavery. And so you begin to see a split, which is going to be kind of even further driven home, but with the Kansas-Nebraska controversy, amongst the Democratic Party, in which Northern Democrats tend to see their political party being run by Southern Democrats, who were obviously the pro-slavery party. Um, the first major third-party threat to the Democrats and the Whigs was the Free Soil Party. The Free Soil Party actually is rather significant in that they have some pretty heavy players in American politics join them. Martin Van Buren, and a couple others uh, who try and create a more of a national political party. They do win a dozen seats in the House, they win a Senate seat, and they do have some national play. But again, compared to the strength that the Democratic Party has throughout the nation, both in the North and then especially in the South, the Free Soilers aren't going to really hold a candle to the power that the Democrats have. In 1848, of course, the Seneca Falls Convention starts to really drive the abolitionists, force the Seneca Falls Convention, the Women's Rights Convention, focusing on the issue of women's suffrage, really kind of fans the flames of abolition. Frederick Douglass was a speaker at the convention. Frederick Douglass, obviously, being the most famous abolitionist of the antebellum time period. And so Seneca Falls, the Free Soil Party, you really start to see the forces of abolition now having a voice. They're not going to take a backseat to the Democratic Party. They're going to begin to challenge the Democratic Party more directly. So I will turn it back over to Eskridge, and we're going to talk about our home state, the great state of California.
Yes, yes. All right. So to the Golden State. All right. So California seeks admission to the United States after gold is discovered at Sutter's Mill. And as we've seen, as VR just talked about, as states are entering, this issue over slavery is really starting to divide the country politically. We're starting to see the rise of new parties, and we see kind of the retirement of one of our great compromisers, Mr. Henry Clay. But Henry Clay is replaced by another very inept and skilled compromiser, Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois, which we're going to find out more about him with Lincoln. But so the Compromise of 1850 is really a collection of compromises. Think of it like a package. And what it promises to do is keep the Missouri Compromise alive. So basically keeping this balance of free and slave states as the United States expands. And so what it really tried to offer was kind of things that Northerners would be okay with and Southerners would be okay with as well, neither of which was completely satisfied, but each felt that they got enough of a piece of the pie to be happy. And so what we see within the compromise is that California is admitted as a free state. The rest of the land of the Mexican cession would be broken up into territorial governments, and there would not be slavery. The slave trade, not slavery itself, would be abolished in the in the capital. And what we really see in here, which is really going to cause more friction between the United States, is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And what that's really going to do, and it's put in there to appease Southerners, and Northerners are really upset about it, and Southerners want it because of the success of the Underground Railroad. And that's about to cut us off. So we'll be